studio. Today I'm going to be talking about the paint that I actually use every day in my studio for my artworks. This is a question that gets asked quite a lot on Instagram, and whenever I ask people what do you want me to talk about, they always ask, what paint do you use? So I thought I would come in today and talk a little bit about that paint and why I choose to use it, and I hope that you guys find this interesting. Towards the end of the video, I'm also going to talk a little bit about how I start a painting. So if you're interested in seeing that, make sure you stick around to the end of the video. Okay, so the paint that I use 90% of the time in my paintings is an Australian brand paint. It's called Matisse, and it's by a company called Derivan. And Derivan produce a wide range of different acrylic paints, from studio quality paints to professional quality paints. So they do have a couple of different varieties in their range, but I tend to use the Matisse Structure, which is their professional quality paint. And it comes in a range of sizes from big tubs. This is like 1 litre, titanium white, because I go through a truckload of titanium white. I also get quite a lot of these are 500ml tubs. You can also get smaller tubs, little tubes. So it comes in a variety of different sizes. And now Matisse also produce paints in a fluid form. So this is actually the fluid version, which just means that it's obviously more runny. It already has a medium in it to loosen up the paint. But I actually prefer to use the Structure, which is the thicker, heavy body version of the paint. And the reason I prefer to use it in this form is because it's a bit more versatile. If I want to make it more runny, I can just add a medium to it. Or to be honest, I usually just use water. I don't use mediums a lot. So if I can add a bit of water to this, and it will loosen up and it will become more runny and more fluid anyway. So because I go through a lot of paint, buying the bigger tubs is a bit more economical for me. And the main reason I really enjoy using Matisse is because the consistency of the paint is really rich and buttery. When you squeeze it out of the tube, it's nice and thick. But as I mentioned earlier, you can water it down and loosen it up really easily. That means it's quite versatile as far as the techniques go that you use it. The colors are super vibrant. They mix together really, really well. And there is also a really large variety of colors. Although I tend to stick to the same kind of limited palette colors, there is a very wide range of colors. And they also have this really awesome range of Australian colors. For example, Australian Sienna, this one is Australian Yellow Green, this one's Australian Blue Gum. So they have a range of pre-mixed sort of colours that suit the Australian landscape really, really well. And I really enjoy using a lot of those colours, and I can't find a lot of them in other ranges. So that's why I tend to use the Matisse quite a lot. And as far as price goes, I will put the price of the Matisse up on the page here once I look it up. But generally speaking, it depends on the color, because the sign of a really good quality paint, whether it's acrylic paint or oil paint or anything really, is does the price vary? If the price varies from one color to the next, you know that that company is using genuine high quality pigments, because all pigments are priced differently depending on how they are obtained, whether they are rare or they're easy to find. So because Matisse has a range, they have different series of colors, that means the prices of the paint changes. So one color might be a totally different price to another color depending on the color. So there is a range of prices, but the prices are quite reasonable. And you can often get them on sale as well, because they're a very common brand in Australia. Lots of art shops stock them, so there's always someone having a sale, and I'm the type of person that's always looking for a bargain, so I do shop around quite a bit to find the best price on the Matisse paints when I need to restock. Along with Matisse, the next brand of paint that I use quite a lot is actually Golden, which is a brand that if you are overseas in the US, for example, you're probably a bit more familiar with. I don't use their heavy body Goldens. I tend to use the fluid acrylic Goldens. I really like their transparency, the saturation of color, and the use of pigment, and the way that I can water them down. If I'm doing washes and glazes or letting the paint drip down, using a liquid acrylic or a fluid acrylic means I don't have to add as much water to the paint in order to get that drippy effect. And so I use the Golden for that. Now, Golden is not an Australian brand, it's an American brand, I believe. So in comparison to the Matisse in Australia, it's actually a little bit more expensive because we have to get it brought in. I did mention that the Matisse do now have a range of fluid acrylics. This is a new product. They didn't have this, 2 years ago. So I have been starting to use these purely because of convenience and price. It's made in Australia, so it's a bit cheaper for me. But I still come back to the golden because there's quite a lot of colors in the golden range, especially their range of sort of earthy kind of colors. Like this is the quinacridone burnt orange, there's quinacridone nickel gold azo, nickel azo gold. These colors, I can't really find the equivalent in any other brand, and I really, really love the rich, earthy sort of colors that they give you. So I tend to use these for those colors. Now, the golden acrylics are really, really nice when you water them down. They create lovely glazes, and they also mix really well when you want to make them a bit more opaque. Just add a little bit of white to them and they will create a whole range of beautiful values. And so I do use these. They are a little bit more expensive, again, for Australians because it's not an Australian brand. So we have to import them, and that means they are a little bit more expensive than the other homegrown brands that I do use. And finally, another brand of paint that I use, which is an Australian company, is Hydrocryl. I use these paints in my workshops when I'm teaching from my studio because they are really great paints for beginners and for people that don't have a lot of experience mixing colors. And the reason why these are so good for that is because they only use one pigment per color. So they don't have a huge range of colors. So for example, like Matisse and Golden have, over 50 or 60 different colors, I think. Hydrocryl only have about 20 or 25, I think, I'm not entirely sure. But they don't have as wide a range of colors, but all the colors that they have use single pigments. That means that when you mix them together, you will get really nice, clean mixes. They're also really economical for me, again, because they are made in Australia. They're actually made in Melbourne, and they come in these really nice big tubs. And so for teaching purposes, I do actually use these in my workshops that I hold at my studio. And I do use them in my artworks as well. I generally use them more for base coats, initial washes of color, and for, mixing up bigger quantities of color because they're a bit more economical. But, for beginners and for people that want to use a good quality paint but don't want to spend a fortune on paint, I cannot recommend Hydrocryl enough. They fit that little bracket perfectly, especially if you are in Australia and you have access to these paints. I do believe that they will ship interstate, not interstate. I do believe that they will ship internationally. I order directly from their website, which I will pop up on the screen now. You can get small jars as well, and they sell a basic set, which has a selection of the basic primaries in it that you can use just to test them out. I will say again, which I said in the last video, this is not sponsored. I don't get any kickbacks from these paints. Hey, Matisse, if you want to sponsor me, you know where to find me. But yeah, no, I don't get sponsorships for any of these paints. So I'm just purely recommending them because that's what I use and that's the product that I think you guys would enjoy using as well. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel so that you can be updated when new videos are released. You can find my artwork at clairebremnerart.com, and you can also find me on Instagram with Claire Bremner at Instagram. Another question that I get asked quite frequently is how do I start my paintings, or where do my paintings begin? And to be honest, most of the time I don't really have much of a plan unless I'm doing a commission. That's a different process. If I'm commissioning a painting for someone, then a bit more planning does go into it. But when I'm just painting, for myself or for an exhibition or something like that, I don't really plan. I kind of just let things happen. So I always begin with a layer of colors on my canvas. I don't like working straight from a white canvas. So as soon as I have the opportunity, before I go too far in the planning or working out what I'm going to do, I will always cover my canvas. Usually in a base of colors that I know that I'm going to be using beforehand. So again, the decision on what colors I use, it's usually a case of me deciding whether it's going to be a warm painting or a cool painting. Once I've made that decision, I can then go forward with the base coats and with the base colors. If it's a cool painting, like this one, for example, then obviously the base colors are going to be blues and greens and cool colors. If it's going to be a warm painting, then I would start with warm colors. Once I've laid down a few of the initial colors, I start to build up those layers, and I actually use the shapes that I have created with the base colors to guide sometimes the plan for the painting. So I automatically put that light blue spot sort of in the middle here in this example. So I kind of decided to make that into a bit of a watery lake area. And so that then dictated where my trees were going to go. So I kind of loosely sketch in an idea, and then I'll stand back and look at it for a while and see if I think that I can move forward with that idea or if it needs a bit of changing. Generally speaking, I paint intuitively. So each step that I take then helps me decide what to do next. So it's a hard process to explain because there really is no rule or way that I paint that's the same every single time. I tend to follow a rough guide the same way, but it's kind of hard to describe how I come up with these ideas because they kind of have a life of their own. And I really love that about painting. And that's the part of the process that I enjoy the most. I enjoy the creating part of the process. Once the painting is complete, I put it aside and I move on. It's the process of creating that gives me the joy. So yeah, I hope that sort of gives you a bit of an insight on how I work.